Okay, Marvel versus DC. You know the drill, right? It's pretty much the biggest rivalry in pop culture, a debate that has fueled comic shops and internet forums for, what, decades now? But what if the real battle isn't about who would win in a fight? What if it's actually about two completely different ideas of what a hero is supposed to be? Today, we're going to peel back the layers on this hidden war of philosophies. So, to really get to the bottom of this, we need to start with a classic fan debate. It seems pretty simple on the surface, but trust me, the answer unlocks the entire philosophical divide between these two powerhouse universes. Ah, yes, the age old question, the billionaire vigilante versus the billionaire futurist. But the interesting thing isn't really who's right. The really cool part is what the debate itself tells us about the core DNA of each universe. See, they're both geniuses, no doubt, but their smarts are on completely different playing fields. Tony Stark, he's a master of the physical world. I mean, the guy can build a miniature arc reactor in a cave with a box of scraps. Bruce Wayne, on the other hand, he's a master of the human world. He's a true polymath, an expert in tactics, forensics, and psychology. He might not be able to build an Iron Man suit, but he can outthink just about anyone. And that right there, that's the key. Because this difference, the engineer versus the detective, the builder of gods versus the master of men, that's not just a character trait. It's basically the entire philosophy of Marvel and DC, all boiled down into one simple comparison. And that difference, the builder versus the detective, that tells you everything about the fundamental split in their storytelling. It's not about whose heroes are stronger. It's about what kind of stories each universe really wants to tell. There's this powerful idea that's been floating around fan circles for years, and honestly, it just nails it. This is our central thesis. Marvel tells stories of humans trying to become gods. DC tells stories of gods trying to become human. One universe is all about grounding the extraordinary, while the other is busy exploring the humanity inside the divine. And you can really see it here, right? On one side, you've got the DC pantheon. I mean, they're like modern myths, these aspirational, symbolic figures. Then on the other side, you have Marvel's heroes. They're just folks, grounded, relatable people who just so happen to have these insane powers. It's the difference between modern mythology and superpowered human drama. And here's how that actually plays out in the stories themselves. A Marvel hero like Peter Parker gets spider powers. But honestly, his biggest villains are paying rent and trying not to fail his classes. I mean, how relatable is that? A DC hero like Superman, though, has all the power in the universe, but his central conflict is his loneliness, his constant struggle to just belong. It's an inspirational burden for sure, but it's also a pretty distant one. And look, this whole philosophy, it came straight from the top. Stan Lee, the architect of the Marvel Universe, famously said this about Superman. He wanted to create heroes you actually worried about, heroes who could lose, who could get hurt, who could bleed. That vulnerability, that's what made Marvel's characters connect so deeply with people. So how did this whole humans first idea actually get from Stan's brain onto the comic book page? Well, it was literally baked right into the unique way they created the comics. It was called the Marvel Method, and honestly, it came about out of pure necessity. Stan Lee's workload got so huge, he just couldn't write full scripts for every single book. So he came up with a new system, one that would end up revolutionizing the entire industry. Okay, so here's how it worked. First, Stan would give the artist a rough plot. Then, the artist, we're talking legends like Jack Kirby or Steve Ditko, would draw the entire issue. They made all the crucial decisions about pacing, action, and how the story looked. This meant the artists weren't just illustrating, they were basically co-plotting. Only after all the art was done would Stan come back in and write the dialogue to fit the pictures. The art and the action came first. Now, this was a huge departure from how the competition did things. DC used a more traditional, writer-driven approach where the artist was basically just illustrating a full screenplay. The Marvel method, though, gave this incredible freedom to the artists. It made the storytelling more dynamic, more visual, and, according to industry vets, this artist-driven process was the secret weapon that helped Marvel finally overtake DC. All right, so we've got a different philosophy and a totally different way of making comics. Now let's fast forward a few decades and see how these two giants face their biggest battleground yet, the Hollywood blockbuster. At the turn of the millennium, things were looking pretty bad. Marvel was actually bankrupt. And DC, they were kind of lost in the corporate chaos of that disastrous AOL-Time Warner merger, which buried the comic division under layers and layers of red tape. But then Marvel did something absolutely insane. They took a huge gamble. Instead of just licensing their characters out, they borrowed $500 million to make the movies themselves. That gamble all started with one film, Iron Man. And this was a total game changer. It meant Marvel finally had full creative and financial control. They could make sure their characters were done right, and even more importantly, they could build an interconnected universe, just like in the comics, all leading up to a massive team-up event. And you can literally see them figuring this out in real time. Just look at the two Hulk movies. The 2003 film from Ang Lee, it was this ambitious, artsy, introspective character study. And it flopped. Hard. Just 5 years later, Marvel Studios rebooted it, and this time they made a straight-up action movie. Maybe it was less ambitious, sure, but it was a much bigger hit. The lesson was crystal clear. The blockbuster formula worked. So what was this magic formula? Well, it was a mix of everything we've been talking about. It started with their core philosophy, flawed human heroes. Then you add the blockbuster essentials, huge budgets, spectacular action, and a massive marketing push. And finally, the secret sauce, that interconnected universe that kept audiences hooked for the long haul. So when you boil it all down, this isn't just about Spider-Man versus Superman. It's a clash of two totally different ways of approaching storytelling, creativity, and business. Let's just break it down one last time, side by side. Marvel's philosophy? It's all about those flawed humans. Their creative process, artist-driven, and their film strategy, a unified, interconnected blockbuster machine. DC's philosophy, on the other hand, centers on these aspirational gods. Their creative process was writer-driven, and their film strategy, at least at first, was all about separate, director-led visions. And it all comes back to this. The entire multi-billion-dollar rivalry, from the comic page all the way to the big screen, can be traced back to that one core difference. Do you want to see a human trying to become a god, or a god trying to become human? Which really just leaves us with one final thought. As audiences start demanding more nuance, more complexity from their heroes, which of these two foundational philosophies is better built to last? The flawed but relatable human, or the perfect but distant god? The battle isn't over. It might just be getting started.